What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Izzyverse. We're going to do our wrestling show now. This is our wrestling show for today, and we're going to be talking about a subject matter that I've been wanting to talk about since it happened, and that is the new wrestling regime of wrestling. The new wrestling regime, right? Especially what's going on in WWE, and we'll also talk a little bit about what's going on with AEW. But before I talk a little bit about that, let me introduce to you all my guest for this evening. He is a co-host of Nerds of the Realm. We talked earlier. We talked a little bit about She-Hulk. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that one, go ahead and watch it. It's already out now. The She-Hulk episode that we just talked about, and he's joining me to talk a little bit more about wrestling in particular. So this is going to be our wrestling show today. So Sebastian Bonet, let's bring him back. Hey,
Oh,
we got a new background for both of us,
there we
right?
go.
Because we're gonna be talking. I got this nice little itch in my eye that's driving me crazy. So let's talk a little bit about wrestling because that's what we're going to be focused on today. So this is going to be very different than our She-Hulk, right? Where we were talking
Yeah,
more about She-Hulk. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the wrestling world today. So, whew, let's
what's happening in the wrestling world today. Big changes that happen, and it's like, I think it's for the adrenaline shot that wrestling needed over the
yeah, I
last few years.
agree. I agree, right? For a very long time, I'll tell you the truth, I slowly dwindle away from watching WWE. Now, I've always kept myself informed. I've always known what's going on. I always kept true to the storylines. But if I missed an episode of Raw SmackDown, I was okay. Right?
I
Even to the point that I was like, I wouldn't watch. I got tired of watching it.
it was tough for me to watch over the last few years because it's like, um, again, and again, all credit to Vince McMahon for what he did for over the years. I was always that firm believer that WWE one was always great when they had competition and when they were innovative with new ideas and actually pushed superstars. We weren't getting a lot of that, and a lot of people's favorite stars and a lot of people's, like, I get it, not every star can be the main star, but it's like, well, there was a lot of people being lost in the shuffle over the last few
Yeah,
years.
and honestly, it was still Vince McMahon was running it the way Vince McMahon wants to run it,
Yeah,
and unfortunately, the man again. Say what you want to say about Vince McMahon, the person, and I do have a podcast where I talk a little bit more about that. Um, but as a promoter, no one's better.
yeah, he built this company from when he inherited from his father from the ground up, took it from the territory days to like this big company that it became. Again, like you said, the person, like, we all know about the person, and there are stories, there's so many stories, but as far as it goes to promoter, there's no denying what he did, what he was able to do. Before wrestling, the history with that is that wrestling used to be a territorial thing where your wrestler wrestled in the territories. WWE had changed that, and they had done something too, where at the time, WrestleMania was hosted in 3 locations simultaneously off the coast.
WrestleMania 2. That was
Yeah.
WrestleMania 2. I remember that.
And so it really changed the landscape, and I think the best wrestling years was when you had the Monday Night Wars. A lot of people became wrestling fans, a lot of superstars were made during that time, and like I said, WWE at that time was on its way out. They were getting their rear ends handed to them by WCW. But Vince McMahon came back with the Attitude Era, which was during the Monday Night Wars, and you had Austin, The Rock, Triple H, all these guys come out of that, and they came out on top. Then you had the Ruthless Aggression Era, which after Ruthless Aggression, that then died down.
It turned into what we call the PG era
Yeah,
of wrestling. But really, let's talk about these 40 years that Vince McMahon was really ruling the wrestling business as a whole, right? So, as you mentioned, he came through. He purchased it from his father, Vince McMahon Senior, and that's where he started devising what's the first his first era, which
yep,
which is known as the Rock and Roll era.
yep,
This is where Hulk Hogan was the figurehead and he was the star attraction, and also brought in celebrities into the fold. Celebrities existed prior, but their position in wrestling wasn't as forthcoming as it was through the WWE era, especially in the rock and roll era, where we had Cyndi Lauper, Mr. T, Liberace. Later on, we'll get Ozzy Osbourne and
We had
Elvira.
Zeus. We had Zeus. Zeus was involved in
Zeus
the
was
wrestling match.
Zeus was involved much later, and he turned, yeah, like you said, territorial world, and he made it into a global phenomenon. So you got to give credit where credit's due to the promoter. Say what you want to say about the individual. He's a rich billionaire, so what else
But
can you
also too,
say, right?
also too, he gave people, because if you look at the body types and everything that was coming into wrestling prior, and the type of characters you saw, he made it bigger than life characters.
There were there
Like
was
they were
there were
giants.
comic book characters. There were
Yeah,
comic book characters come to life, right? Hogan was big. And strangely enough, his enemies were mostly as big as him. There's only two guys I
and
can think
Hogan's
about.
not a small dude. He was about
No,
6'7".
he's 6'7". He was a big dude, and his guys. He had King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, who really represented the old reign. But he also had wrestling types as well as arch rivals, starting with Roddy Piper, who to me is the greatest heel of all time.
Yeah,
And then you had Macho Man Randy Savage, who by far is one of the best stories in wrestling with Elizabeth, the Mega Powers, and then when the Mega Powers exploded. That story was so perfect. And during this particular time in wrestling, it was exciting. It felt fresh. It was predictable. It was still predictable, but
but
it
it was
was
entertaining
it
at
was
the time.
entertaining, right? Exactly. Then we had the new generation. The new generation was led by Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. It dwindled out. It became more watered down because Hogan was out. Hogan went to WCW, but even when he went to WCW and he took Macho Man with him,
Well, they took a lot of it. So what happened, like for me, when I saw that, when Hogan left, it was kind of like, WCW was becoming WWE WWF 2.0 at the time, because the
yeah,
new generation, you had Bret Hart, you had Shawn Michaels, you had Diesel. These were cool characters. But then you also had that mix of characters that, you still had your cartoonish characters that were popping up there, like Duke the Dumpster Trotsky, Adam Bomb. So it was still doing that cartoonish stuff. It really took Nash
Mansoor.
and yeah, man, so, like a lot of these characters were failed characters, so it's like I think a lot of people were falling out at the time. It was when WCW launched Nitro, and then when they had, and it really took effect when Kevin Nash and Scott Hall showed up and that NWO era started. It really, I think, also helped give it an adrenaline boost because Vince McMahon was paying attention to it. He started, like, and
He was
that's what,
forced to pay attention to it.
yeah.
He was forced.
Well, and the attitude era, if you really look at it, when Shawn Michaels dropped the belt to Stone Cold Steve Austin, was really the solidification of the attitude era and the retirement of that new generation, in a way, because
Yeah,
Michaels went out with the back injury.
Michaels went out with a back injury. Bret Hart left due to issues and it was not a good send off, but it started something because we created the Mr. McMahon character from it by
Yep.
happenstance. It wasn't done on purpose, guys. No matter what they tell you, it wasn't done on purpose.
No. It
Mr. McMahon was a character that was formed based off of the Montreal Screwjob, which if you're a wrestling fan, you have heard ad nauseum this story. But the for those of you that don't know about the Montreal Screwjob, is really where Bret Hart was leaving the company. He was contracted to leave, so it was his last day. And there's a lot of different sides to the story. Um, Out of protection, McMahon forcefully removed the title from him. Out of protection for the title, which, you know what? When I look at the story, I do side a bit with McMahon on it.
I kind of
Only
did.
because Only
No, I
because I could understand what he was going through during that time because we had Medusa who dropped the belt. We had them, saying things, and the pride of Bret Hart really got in the way of the business side. But again, based on the stories of what Shawn Michaels was doing, because Shawn Michaels was in a bad place, and Shawn Michaels being just a jerk, all around jerk, Bret Hart had this sense of pride in him. He didn't want to drop the title. And worst of all, he wanted to drop the title the next day and just hand it over. And that's not going to work.
No,
That doesn't fly.
it wasn't gonna fly. What really sucked about that matter is this: is like Bret Hart. You're not gonna take away from him. He's the best there is, the best there ever was be. And it was at that moment that Bret was doing and I again I take McMahon's side for this one because it was what Bret was doing was best for Bret. I understand, but it's like at the end of the day, you are not you are not the owner of the company. You're not the promoter. You're leaving the company, and the best thing you could do is leave the company on the way out, to leave them on a high note. You were leaving to WCW at the time, and the big problem is that a lot of guys had already left. Like you had Lex Luger that left. You had Medusa that did the stuff with the women's title where she
They
dropped
dropped
it
the
in the
belt.
trash on television. So it's like it was WWE, WWF, that was known for at the time, was already looking weak with what WCW was doing. So
Yeah.
Vince at the time was all he was doing was this: he was protecting his business.
Hmm.
And again, as much people like want to side with Brad, as much people want to side with Vince, and and a lot of people say Vince was the one that said, "Listen, you all stay shut about it. The heat comes on me." And a lot of it that was because you saw it like in the videos. Hunter and Sean are like, "I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen." They followed their leader,
Their leader, yeah.
and it's like,
And
and at the
McMahon
end,
paid for it with a nice
yeah,
black eye.
he did, which is like I said, you could say a lot about the character, but he was about protecting that business. He was about protecting the integrity because also too, he still had a lot of guys that were working for him.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you think about it, if Brett left with the title, there's no telling what would have happened.
Well, I think Brett would have dropped the title respectfully because he is a wrestling guy. So he wasn't like Nash and Hall. Say what you want to say about Hall and Nash, and they're great performers, but to them it was more about the money than it was about the business.
Yeah, they
So
they didn't shy about that.
yeah, they didn't
It
deny
was
that.
about there was about and at the time it's like it's understandable. Dredd was like I said, when because I saw the documentary, I know that yeah, he was, there were some financials that were involved in it, and he was trying to get more money out of Vince. But at the time, Vince's coffers didn't have. I mean, if you really think about it, the most loyal wrestler that Vince has had has been the Undertaker. Undertaker has been with him since day one, even through that era, and could have been one
Hmm.
of the guys that left to WCW2 at the time, and he
Yeah,
didn't.
and there was some rumors at one time that he
Yeah,
was. I remember those rumors when he was missing in action for a while.
yeah, he was
This is where
pissed
we
off
got
with the
the
Montreal
American bat.
Screwjob.
Yeah. So in particular with him, yeah, loyalty is a big deal, especially for McMahon in particular. But and I use the word particular a lot, guys. Sorry, that's my word. Um, Thinking about the Montreal Screwjob, and we'll move on from there. The Montreal Screwjob was inevitable. It was
Yeah,
going to happen in one way or another. Unfortunately for Brett, it didn't happen the way he wanted it to happen. But then again, I don't think McMahon wanted it to happen that way anyway. No one did. No one wanted it to happen that way because the optics of it was damaging. But who succeeded from it was McMahon.
yeah,
So he was able to take this negative and turn it into a positive. And more importantly, it took the art of wrestling storytelling, pro wrestling storytelling, to another level. Like, oh, this just got real, and now let's take it to that next step where he came out and he used the Brett Screw Brett line, which was really him working us.
yeah,
He was working us with that story. It wasn't that he was trying to be serious about it. Yeah, of course there was some seriousness to it, but that's when he was developing this character. He learned from this experience how to make a character out of himself, because before that he was never part of the landscape as a character in that way. He wasn't a wrestling figure. He was an announcer who was really behind the scene. Everybody knew he was the boss, but he didn't. Like he didn't sensationalize it. It was like he's there and he's doing this as he's watching. So it gave him an opportunity to keep an eye on his product, but at the same time be part of that. So that creates the Attitude Era. We all know it's the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin, which then becomes the rise of The Rock, which then becomes the rise of Triple H. And we ended up having a lot of good years of, I don't want to say quality wrestling, but the
But
most
it was entertaining.
entertaining,
It was the
the
most
most
entertaining
entertaining,
runs. I mean,
right?
even when you went that, you got into the invasion, and then when you went in from that, what's up, Rick? Even when you went into that, then you had what was it? The Ruthless Aggression Era, which brought
Yeah.
in Brock Lesnar and all, and then after that, it just trailed off
Yeah,
because
I think the death of Benoit really was the downfall. All right. Hey, look who's on the show right now.
Rick, Rick.
He had no clue that you were a wrestling fan. Look at
Oh yeah, a big wrestling fan, Rick.
that. Yeah, welcome aboard, Rick. Thanks for the comment. Um, so we get the Ruthless Aggression Era, and obviously the death of Chris Benoit made him change their business. Unfortunately, it was dull, it was dry, it was weak,
Yeah,
and
and yeah, I'm sorry, Izzy.
yeah, it was dull, dry, and weak, and then we end up getting a slight hit of adrenaline, and that's the man known as CM Punk. When he came into the scene, I remember when he first came into the scene, I saw him. It was the first time I saw him. So first time I saw CM Punk was in WWE when he was the defunct ECW. Um, but I saw something in him, and I said, "This guy has something that I don't know what it is right now. He doesn't look like your traditional wrestler would look."
No, he was cool because he also was because it's funny before WWE got him for the ECW rebranding, he was in TNA a part of Raven's new
Yeah,
flock at the time.
TNA. He was also Ring of Honor. He was a big
Yep.
Ring of Honor character. Um, yep, there we go. We got some more stuff. Oh, he did say something. Been a wrestling promoter here. Oh, look at that.
Oh damn, that's awesome, Rick.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no.
exactly. It
Yeah.
was definitely a slippery slope because these deaths really were impactful. Benoit's death was, whew,
No,
but
Brent.
Eddie Guerrero's sudden death was also a big deal. So, yeah, and then if the Cena
Yeah,
Force
the super
push,
push. Yeah, because Cena's push hurt. I remember what was it, the Nexus? It really hurt those guys.
and the thing with Cena, here's the thing with Cena. I think looking back at it now, and I was never a Cena hater. I'm gonna be the first one to say
Yeah.
I never hated Cena. Um, I wasn't crazy about him, being on top. But then again, it's the same formula they had for every different era.
And but I think that that's what a lot of people didn't like is because Cena would come in. It'll be like, who's the monster of the week? Who's the big guy that Cena's gonna take? And like Cena and Edge had some great matches. Cena and Orton had some great matches, but it's like Cena steamrolled. Like they had him on the program with a lot of guys, and he steamrolled over a lot of guys. And it's nothing against Cena, is what the promoter did. A lot of guys got buried
Yeah, because
during Cena's run.
and you know what? But it was still based off of, and you're right. It
Yeah, he
wasn't
just did
Cena's
his
fault.
job. He did his job, but a lot of
He
guys
did his
did get
job,
buried.
and he was good at his job. That was the thing about Cena.
Mhm.
He was good at his job, and here's why: he was a merch seller,
Yeah.
right? The kids adore him. Adore him. To this day, he's still the number one Make a Wish guy,
Yeah.
right? He
And
still owns the record. So Cena didn't do anything wrong. However, to the diehard wrestling fan, right, the guy that's really into wrestling, Cena was just a sign of corporate America taking over wrestling, and that was the problem. And Cena didn't deserve that. Yeah, he was a three move wrestler, but then again, so was Hogan.
yeah.
Austin was a true wrestler. I'll admit to that one. But
I think a lot of people forget, like with Austin in his era, I think what a lot of people miss is that during Cena's era, you didn't have like a great mid card scene like you did during Austin, The Rock, and Triple H, because you had a great mid card scene, and WWE lacked that for so
and they
long.
lack that even to now
Yep.
because the problem Cena was the last true superstar, right? Say what you want to say about Roman Reigns, but we'll talk about him right now in a minute. What happened with Cena was Cena became bigger than the product. And that's what happened year after year, right? And one thing that WWE did not like, and I'll admit they don't like it even now, they don't like it when the wrestler becomes bigger than the wrestling. Or better
Like,
yet, better than the promotion. Because they're not wrestling promotions.
well, that's why
They're
CM Punk blew up, because he called that out, and that's
he
what he
called it
made his
out.
promos. He made his promos really great because he was calling out the truth that the fans already knew.
Yeah, he knew the truth. The pipe bomb scene was really all taken from the heart. The summer of Cena was not the summer of Cena. The summer of Punk was a big deal. Summer of Cena was a few years ago, and what ended up happening in WWE is that they kept their wrestlers down, even their biggest cards. So the problem with Roman Reigns was he was unnatural. Roman Reigns today is amazing, but during
When he,
that time, he was unnatural. He was generic. He was forced upon us. And then to make
but they
matters
did
worse,
they did
yeah,
the thing I said with Roman that I've been saying for the longest. I was like, do what you did with The Rock. Make this guy heel. Let him run like that. Don't push him as the baby face. Push Rollins. Rollins was a great baby face. Reigns should have been the heel, not
mhm,
Rollins. Reigns should have been the one that, like, because when The Rock did his best work, remember when The Rock debuted it?
mhm. Yeah, I
They
was
pushed him
there.
as a baby face.
I was there. I was there
The
for the
crowd there
Rock's
with a
debut.
baby face, right? Like,
Survivor Series, Rocky Maivia. I was there. He was in the match. He was the sole survivor.
he blew up when he became a heel. And I was like, yo, Roman is gonna blow up if they make, and what they do, they made him heel. And we got like now the head of the table,
The
which I'm
head of the
like, yo,
table.
this is, again, that's all you had to do. And you gave him a great mic piece in Paul Heyman.
Mhm. And he doesn't need Paul Heyman, but because
No.
Paul Heyman kind of like they work off each other, and that's what makes Paul Heyman such a great character because
You
he understands his characters. He
you
understands the people he's representing in a way that okay, I know this guy's not much of a talker, so I'll talk for him. Same thing with Brock Lesnar, right? He spoke for Brock Lesnar.
yeah.
He did that for Cesaro. A lot of people forget that he was Cesaro's advocate, but the only problem was that Cesaro he wasn't ready for that time. He was at that particular time he wasn't ready. Um, all right, so Rick is having a blast sending out these
Rick will
messages here.
drop it. I'm telling you, Rick is awesome.
Look at he's killing it right
No,
here, man.
but oh,
Uh,
no, I agree. It's they waited too long to do it. They have no top faces right now. And the thing about it too is
well, they
that
have one now.
probably
Now
one
they
now.
have one.
But you know what? I knew Roman was a great heel when they were pushing him to be a babyface. Look at all his Twitter stuff at the time of how he was owning people. I'm like, oh, you give him the mic, this guy is going to be a great heel.
Mhm.
Just the way he was responding and owning fans that were trying to talk smack about him on Twitter.
Mhm. Well, the other one that we forget to talk about, which I didn't get to talk about a lot, Becky Lynch.
Yeah, Becky was awesome. She definitely helped with bringing out the one scene, because she definitely broke a mold where it's like you could see that she probably would have been someone in the back end.
Mm-hmm. Look at
Yeah,
that count.
he was another guy they dropped. I mean, Cesaro again is another great dude, and it probably leads into other stuff that we're probably going to talk about, like
Yeah,
we
but
have
what
lined up
I
for
was
us.
talking about when Heyman was representing Cesaro, he wasn't ready.
Yeah,
At that time, he was still fresh. He wasn't green. He was never a bad. Let me be on the record and say Cesaro was never a bad wrestler, right? But he's not. He doesn't have a mouth. He doesn't have the ability to speak. He at that time he was still fresh. He was still green in his promos. So you put him with Heyman. The problem here was that it wasn't working because Heyman was representing multiple people in a weird way. So it wasn't that Heyman creating a faction, is that he was a representative of Lesnar, he was a representative with Punk, and then
And they
Cesaro was kind of like mixed in all that. And
and they
they weren't glued together.
and that's the thing where they dropped it. I mean, if they had built that like as a stable, kind of like how Bobby the Brain Heenan had his stable of people he represented. Million Dollar Man had his stable of people.
Well,
They
the
could have
Dangerous
really done it.
Alliance. The Dangerous
Yeah,
Alliance is a perfect example. So it's not to say that Heyman doesn't know how to make a stable. He had a great stable, but
it's just they
it's
didn't
that
know how to
time.
write it. They didn't know how to put it together because it's like, again, at that time was a lot of guys. Like Cesaro's one of those guys who got lost in the shuffle. It's like you get him heel one day, then you had him as face, then you have him as this, they didn't know what to do with Cesaro.
I think Cesaro caught his stride when he was put together with Sheamus.
Yeah,
That's when he caught his stride. That's when we started seeing something come out of. And again, it was more on the lines of, I'm sick and tired of being second fiddle. And with Cesaro, it's very strange. And I see Rick, man. I trust you, Rick. It's not to say I don't trust you, man. But and I'm not saying that he didn't reach for the brass ring. I'm not saying that.
it's just there was no opportunity, obviously.
There was, yeah, and I think in Cesaro's case, he does need a mouthpiece. I'm sorry. I think that's what's going to make him really well now because he has a bit of a mouthpiece with Regal.
But I
Regal's
did.
great for that
Oh
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
but I think
So,
that's why it's one of the great things that of Vince now stepping down. We're getting a new era of this where a lot of guys who are under that Vince era,
mhm.
they're like talk about the brass ring, but you were never able to grasp it
Yeah,
because
the problem with the brass ring it was just like the Money in the Bank, right? If you didn't want to get it, he's just gonna raise it up. He's gonna just keep raising it up. So every time you went to reach for it, and some people did, um, I use Dolph Ziggler as a perfect example.
yeah,
Dolph Ziggler was at his best during that Survivor Series run where Sting showed up. If you remember that one, that when Sting made his wrestling debut, Ziggler could have gone as far as being a WrestleMania main event in the projection he was going, and they dropped the ball on Ziggler. If anybody's been given dropped the ball on, is Ziggler.
yeah. And
Because
Ziggler was the great artillery guy that they had. He could do face, he could do heel, he could make people look good, he could sell a match. Ziggler was your all around guy that you really, really, really needed in a match. I mean, because if you think about it, everybody goes Ric Flair is the greatest wrestler. Ric Flair made other people look great. That's
and
why
that's why
he was great, and that's what Ziggler did. Ziggler had that. Ziggler
well
still has that.
Ziggler's today's version of a Shawn Michaels without having the glory of a Shawn Michaels, right?
Yeah,
He was Ziggler was won that Survivor Series one, but it never took him any further, and that's part of that problem that Ziggler had, and really the last years of McMahon. The problem with the last years of McMahon is that he forgot what it meant to build people. I don't know what happened to McMahon.
he. He got old. Let's be honest. He lost touch with people. He got old. He wants to see what he wants to see. Like, and then the producers had to keep fighting. Like, there's a story where Road Dogg says that he had to fight with Vince to push AJ Styles.
Yeah,
Because
wow.
AJ, a lot of people, AJ has a lot of fans. AJ is a main eventer. AJ has main evented in so many companies
Well, the
and
Tokyo
has that
Dome.
fight star. Yeah. And he's wrestled for so many companies. And another thing is that with Vince McMahon, you hear the stories over the years. Vince McMahon is a prideful dude. He buried a lot of the WCW guys just to show he won. And let's be honest, when Sting got to finally wrestle for WWE, he kind of buried Sting.
Yeah, and dropped the ball on Sting
Yeah,
altogether.
it could have been a great thing, but it's like you saw the burial there when it was like at WrestleMania, NWO comes out to help Sting, and then Generation X comes out to help Hunter. But it became that thing where it's like, yeah, Degeneration X was better than NWO, we're better than WCW, and it's like you kind of buried it. You
And,
buried
and
all these guys.
and as I recall, Sting was never really truly an NWO. We're not going to include the
Yeah,
Wolf
we're
Pack.
not gonna. It's yeah. It just again. This was more.
Why would these guys go save
It was
Sting?
more. Yeah, it was more the final nail on the coffin
Hmm.
of him saying WWE was always better than WCW. And listen, at the end of the day, you had a bunch of great guys that came over, and
Hmm.
you buried a lot of like Diamond Dallas Page. You gave him the stalker gimmick.
Oh, that was bad.
This and Diamond Dallas Page was known as a main eventer. And again, that was his ego at the time. The invasion could have been such a great storyline. And I get it. It was like, yeah, we got like a lot of B-listers because a lot of people set out their contracts. But at the end of the day, if it wasn't about burying people, it could have been such a great storyline to come and a lot of great things.
And you know what? All those people that we talk about they eventually came.
Yeah.
All of them. All of them. They not a single person did not come from that time period. So they all let their contracts run out. They were all rehired in some way or fashion. And you could have actually had that true invasion storyline if you were patient.
Yeah. And also it's like this. When they got the end, when they finally pulled the trigger on the NWO, I get it. Some of the guys were injured, but you didn't feel like it was a real NWO. Aces and Eights in TNA felt more like an NWO angle, and they did that well until the unmasking. Because these were
Yeah.
guys just entering the impact zone, running in from the crowd. If they had done something like that, like the Shield, the way they handled the Shield was the way they should have handled the NWO when Vince pulled that trigger.
Well,
It should have.
the first ECW invasion, when ECW was actually still ECW, that was a good little twist that they threw in there. So a lot of that Sean O'Hara should have been in. I don't know about that.
He was in it for a hot second, and they kicked him out and took Batista.
And I think they made a good choice because Batista, when he was in Evolution, he was great. So let's talk. Let's get to the move on because we're a half hour in and we're still talking about the McMahon era. So just recently, just a few weeks ago, McMahon did what is many consider the unthinkable for him. He resigned. Right? He claimed his retirement. We all know why he really left, but
The
which I
board
don't
member's
want to
like, "You
go.
gotta go, bro. You're giving us a bad
Like,
name."
like yeah, dude, man. Can you like leave? Imagine that conversation. Um, and he's still primary shareholder, so he's still it's still his show in one way or another. But McMahon's out, and now we have not just one, we have a few people. So Triple H is now is the head of talent relations, who did a phenomenal job when he was running NXT. And as co CEOs, we have Miss Stephanie McMahon Helmsley, as I'll call her, and the other Khan, which Nick Khan.
I don't I yeah I don't have a lot of love for Nick because he definitely comes in with that corporate background, and really I think that because you have Triple H and Stephanie right now that's kind of like 50, that's kind of like 70% power versus his 25. We'll do
Hmm.
some Scott Steiner math in a second, but Triple H ahead of creative, you
Hmm.
have a who one, he's a student of the game, hence the
Hmm.
game, because he did learn a lot from Vince. He did
Yeah.
learn a lot, but also too,
Yep.
yeah, I
You're
believe he
right.
is. He is.
He is.
But also too, he knows how it is to be a wrestler. So he grew up and he was in those areas. He's
He was in the
knows,
trenches.
yeah. And he's also too, what a lot of people don't know, when Sean left, when Nash and Hall left, they couldn't punish
He was
Sean.
buried.
They buried Trip. He knows how to be a guy who's buried in the
He
company too.
understands being buried.
So
He understands it because he had to deal with it. But what was always interesting about Triple H, and I remember this, was when he was in DX proper, he wasn't allowed to win. So he will make it to the main event. He'll get into matches with guys like The Rock and Austin and things like that. And he wasn't allowed to win. It's when he spread outside of DX is when he became the game. And say what you want to say about Triple H. Triple H is one of those guys, as a wrestler, he embodies the same ideas that came from a Ric Flair when Ric Flair was part of the Horsemen. Because all Evolution was just a new version of the Horsemen. And he took it. So I give a lot of respect to Triple H in particular because he understands the business of wrestling as a wrestler, and now he understands the business as a promoter, being under the wings of McMahon, And of course, Stephanie's there as well. So Stephanie's part of that rave because Stephanie's seen it happen. She grew up in the business. The only one that's not involved is Shane, and I don't know what happened there.
I mean, I think it's good with that because Shane, and it's nothing against Shane O'Mac. I think it has to go with his last match, that how he was out to sell himself. And I think that told you a lot about that. He had a lot of his father in him, whereas Triple H, he's a guy from the outside perspective. He doesn't have that McMahon
He doesn't have that ego.
pride. Yeah. And I don't even think Stephanie has it that much because, with her and Triple H, I think they are a power couple in wrestling.
Yeah.
Because one is like they do definitely listen to the fans, they see what's out there, but they're also paying attention, like what wrestlers are hot, what not. It's like it's not about the big overall big guys anymore. It's like it's about the AJ Styles and everything and all that.
Yeah, I'm looking at this comment.
Yeah, the Royal Rumble. It was the Royal Rumble.
It was the Royal Rumble, man.
That's where he messed up. And
he was like, telling Brock
he messed up.
Tell Brock to do things, and I'm happy. I'm happy we got the McMahon era because, of course, without McMahon, we wouldn't have WWE. I'm sorry to say it. Say what you want to say.
It's true. But now we have the McMahon Helmsley era, which is like a Paul Levesque is in with building with NXT with what he did from that brand, because everybody remembers it was Florida Championship Wrestling. It was. NXT was just like some funky reality show. He took it and really changed the whole dynamic of it. And you saw a lot. Like, I remember going to a live NXT event, and it was crazy. It was like you still had that indie feel, but on a bigger production scale. And it still felt like a great show. And wrestlers were out there doing their thing. And you saw great matches. You saw better matches in NXT than you did on the main roster.
Oh, absolutely. Like when Adam Cole came in, I was at that one, the Brooklyn show where Adam Cole made his debut. Bobby Roode was a fantastic character, the glorious character, which they definitely dropped the ball.
His debut. I was there. It was when he debuted it and you heard his music hit, everybody.
Yeah, because you hit a chord with Glorious. And it's sad that they messed it up, right? And that's the case for a lot of these guys, right? Dean Ambrose, you screwed up his character. You messed up a lot. There were some characters that you couldn't screw up. Daniel Bryan, you couldn't screw that up because it was impossible to screw that up. And then, when he made his return, it was also impossible to screw that up because he's the ultimate underdog character.
Yeah.
And you couldn't mess that up.
But there's a lot of guys that they dropped the ball with. What's like, I feel like if Triple H had control, like for example, Bray Wyatt was a great character. Yeah. I mean, for Husky, for the guy who was also known as Husky Harris to go back and redevelop himself. If Triple H had more control over that on the main roster, it's like, again, a lot of these guys, we would have had some really great matches and superstars, because you see a lot of them, they left the company and they're flourishing outside.
Well, yeah,
for
absolutely.
Some reason can't flourish inside. It's like, and they were flourishing in NXT, but then it's like, oh, there's the NXT curse. I was like, no, it was a similar thing that happened with TNA. They brought over all these guys, and it's like some of these guys couldn't make it on the main roster. But it's like they would just again, it was a lot of burrow because of like it has to be this WWE style. You have to know this WWE style. It was more writers. It was more the mic stuff and all that. But it's like Chris Benoit, for example, may rest in peace. And again, we know the tragedy of Chris Benoit. He's probably one of the few exceptions that made through WWE where he didn't have to use the mic. It was his wrestling style. And a lot of people, and there are a lot of guys on the roster that are not great on the mic. Their wrestling style tells that, and Triple H sees that.
And but with Benoit's case, what Benoit had going for him, first of all, his intensity.
Yeah.
His intensity was amazing because when he would do a suplex, there was this added leverage that he would do with it, the speed that came with it that you didn't see with other wrestlers. And he's from the Hart family dungeon, man. You couldn't deny that from him. But one of the guys, Rick is mentioning somebody that I wanted to talk about a little bit. Killer Kross, right? As I like to call him, Killer Kross. Clarion, I've never been a fan. When they brought him into the main roster, that was just one of the nails to the coffin of what is the WWE PG era, where you gave him the suspenders, you gave him the stupid mask, he gets released. All these releases are happening. You mentioned Bray Wyatt. The cult leader Bray Wyatt was fantastic. Then when we have the version with the Fiend, that was also great. And you dropped the ball with that on Hell in the Cell. How could you do that?
Yeah,
What they did with Hell in the Cell.
it sucked because it was such a great character that got buried so much. And like again, Cross was killing it in NXT. Then you bring him up and do this whole stupid gimmick. It's like, dude, we're done with the days of the crazy dumb gimmicks. They don't work.
Mm-hmm.
But yet,
Keith Lee is another one.
yeah,
So and Braun Strowman say what you want to say about Braun Strowman. When Braun Strowman was hot, he was on
yeah,
fire.
that was a, and again, that was a Nick, that was a, it's Nick Khan, right? Nick Khan, because it gets the cons mixed up. That was a Khan decision to drop Strowman, and Strowman again was a very athletic big man. This is a big man you wanted in the roster. Nothing against the great Khali or anything like that, but
But he was
Strowman was the,
immobile.
yeah, he was mobile. He was kind of reminiscent to how Big Show was back in the day. He was a mobile big man. And Braun was just, he was a guy who was believable that can go up against a Brock Lesnar and give you a great match.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Strowman was a little green with some stuff, but Strowman was also still again one of those guys who was a student of the
Yeah.
game, and it was just one of those upsetting things. Like, yeah, we're just gonna let him go. Why? He was a great big man. Why? Because you want to, and nothing against Omos, because we have a, Omos is just again very similar to like a Giant Gonzalez, maybe a little better, but he's like, he will throw his weight around. But Strowman was movable. He
Yeah.
was he was. It's like the Undertaker. Undertaker was a movable big man.
Yeah.
Kane, movable big man.
Absolutely. He could do kick-ups. Yep. Strowman
Yeah,
could do kick-ups. And Strowman was one of those guys that he was another wrestler that you saw had a future. He was building a future. And one of the things that happened to a lot of these characters were they were building their character up to become huge stars only to be dragged back down. Like, oh no, you can't be bigger than the company.
and
That
I
kind of thing. And
and I think
it happened over and over and over. And then there was just some people that were able to go, break through the crack. Becky Lynch being one of them, where Becky Lynch and Daniel Bryan were two people in particular that they were able to find a crack and go through that crack,
yeah,
where
they were,
everybody else couldn't get past it.
and I think that's what's going to change definitely in the
Yeah,
Triple H era, because you're going to have wrestlers that are going to come up. You're going to see matches that, and again, it's going to be a fresh take, because again, I think it was time for the change it, because I kept saying like I fell off the WWE product because it had gotten boring.
it
It,
really did.
I fell more in love with NXT. I watched that more. I was like, oh, I love Shinsuke Nakamura's matches. I love when he debuted it. Samoa Joe. I say that their true WWE runs were in NXT, not the
Yeah,
main roster.
yeah, I agree. So we have this, and because of that attitude, because of that thing, that's where we ended up getting the formation of really AWA. AEW. Wow, that's going way back.
AWA.
AEW. Wow.
Yeah.
Right? That's going way back. Yeah, Nick Bockwinkel.
Or you could go WWA, World
Yeah.
Wrestling All Stars.
Oh, there you
That
go.
defunct company.
Whew. Yeah, remember Titan Sports?
Oof.
So AEW was created based off of one match. One match caused it. It was Jericho versus Omega, the first one. And it was because Jericho made the decision to go to New Japan on Vince McMahon's blessing. Because Vince McMahon told him you could go. Because he said he was a WWE guy. But with Vince McMahon's blessing, he left WWE to go face Kenny Omega in what we call a dream match. They had an amazing match, and it caught the eye of this guy that I'm going to show right now. Caught the eye of this guy, who's always been a wrestling mark. Say what you want to say about Tony Khan. He's a wrestling mark. He loves wrestling,
He's a wrestling fan.
right? And it caught his eye. And then we have guys like Kenny Omega. Cody Rhodes, and the Young Bucks, who at that time were the Bullet Club, because the Bullet Club became huge. There was
They
a time
became,
that,
yeah, they were the Bullet Club, and then they were Elite.
right? So the Bullet Club and this particular group of the Bullet Club were known as the Elite Bullet Club members, right? AJ Styles was before that. Finn Balor, who was Prince Devitt, was also part of it. That's someone that they dropped the ball on. Right? Big time. You really messed that one up. Just
Oh
recently too with
God.
the Demon. Um, so they end up going, Cody Rhodes, who came from the WWE system, he left to pursue greener pastures. He took his wife with him, and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega was part of the NXT system, but he was never really part of it because he was more of a performance talent at that time. But he had his share of time in WWE, and the Bucks were in WWE, but they were really local
They
talent. They
they
were
didn't
local
they
talent.
didn't make it in the W. They were TNA for a while. Then they went to WWE with a
Yeah,
tryout match, and it
Generation
was,
Me.
yeah. I think it was, what was it? What was the nail in their coffin was something about their interaction with Booker T.
Yeah,
Something about, and then that set their nail in the coffin because it was like they were supposed to be. I guess it was very corporate back then at the time,
yeah,
and so they just set out to do their own,
mhm,
and which was probably one of the smartest and best things for their career.
yeah. So they all end up working together with Tony Khan. Tony Khan calls them up and says, "Hey, would you be interested?" They create All In. Let's face it, Tony Khan was involved already, but it wasn't AEW at the time. They do this indie show, which was amazing. I remember watching it and I was like, "This is awesome."
I think it's
Cat Ray,
outsold some WWE pay-per-views too.
yeah, and it sold out the arena. So the arena was sold out, and it was all based off a bet with Dave Meltzer. It was all based like you can't sell out, and of course Dave Meltzer was in on the whole thing. It was an inside job, guys. It wasn't happenstance. They were all conspiring to make this happen. They make All In. It was very successful. Now Tony Khan has something to talk about because it was really Ring of Honor was part of it, NWA was part of it. It was, and again, it was a super card. They create the show. It's very successful, and of course they decide to go double or nothing, as they say. And there we get AEW on January 1st was the announcement. I'm trying to remember. It was early January 1st when they made the announcement. They did the whole being the elite show, and then they showed the phones with AEW, and it was amazing. Yep, it was the most
Yep.
sold out pay per view of the year, right? To test the waters, and it really was a test the waters. Great. There was some amazing matches in that card.
And it was a lot of great stars too because people were looking for alternatives.
And yeah, this is according to Cody himself. They formed AEW and wrestling returned. It was sports entertainment and wrestling finally returned to the main stage. It always been around. It never left, but it,
I
it
think it,
returns to
it
the.
gave it its adrenaline shot that it needed, its
Mhm.
boost, and it's like
It made
it
the
was.
alternative. It became the alternative, right? It became the alternative to WWE, who was really monopolizing the business and for the worst.
And
Um,
it was a great because I remember a lot of people expected TNA to be that adrenaline shot,
it was
but we
trying
all
to.
thought it was trying to, but TNA became WCW 2.0, WCW, where it became rough shot over there, and what happened when it was run under Dixie Carter and all that. But AEW really gave it because you had again the guys from the elite who are helping put this together. It's Kenny Omega, the Bucks, Cody Rhodes, and then Jericho steps in, and it's like, and also too, they had a great um force behind them being Khan. TNA didn't have that budget because Jared, because Dixie Carter didn't she wasn't a, let's be honest, Dixie Carter was not a wrestling fan,
No, she wasn't a
and
wrestling fan.
when she lost her parents' money, because again it was the parents that were funding it and they pulled out, and then it became Panda Energy. But you had Tony Khan who had money, who has money, and it's like, there we go. That was the recipe, and then they knew how to get the fans going with these matches and everything, with what the fans wanted to see that WWE was not giving them.
Yeah, and we were getting it through New Japan. So let's not forget
Yeah,
what New Japan was doing. New Japan Wrestling really helped the wrestling worlds open their eyes to what's out there. Because if it wasn't, I have to say, you got to give New Japan all the credit in the world because they were like, oh no, we're wrestling and we're going to be wrestling. We're going to stay wrestling. And even though we're in Japan, you can still watch us because now you have accessibility through streamers and things. And then the indie scene was actually growing at
No,
that time too.
yeah, because you had Evolve, but then
You had
Evolve got
Evolve,
absorbed. But then Evolve got absorbed by WWE. You had
Ring
Ring
of
of
Honor,
Honor. You have that they're still around. They're still doing their thing, and Ring of Honor.
MLW.
But WWE was they were poaching a lot of these guys, and they were just
Mhm,
wasting away. Which then when AEW now comes on the scene, because it's either you got poached by WWE or you had to go overseas. With
mhm,
AEW coming in, they were able to now show to give the fans these guys and give these guys a great platform
mhm.
outside of WWE.
Yeah, and it's still and what's great about AEW that I love is that it still has that touch of WCW.
It does.
It has that sensibility of WCW, but the sensibility that it has of WCW is the early days of WCW. When WCW was more of an NWA product, Crockett Promotions, I like to say. So Crockett Promotions is really the spearhead behind the NWA that will eventually become WCW. WCW at first, for those people that don't know, WCW was the show. It was really the show, and it was what's his name, Ted Turner. It was Ted Turner that bought that portion of wrestling. So they bought Crockett Promotions. Crockett Promotion had all the wrestlers, like all the main wrestlers were from Crockett. That's where Ric Flair was. That was Dusty Rhodes. Were that's where the Road Warriors were. Midnight Express, the Horsemen, you name it, they were
Yep.
all part of that world.
But
They're all
here's
part of that wrestling group.
but here's the
And
thing. I mean, go ahead,
yeah,
JD. I'm sorry.
no, and then what we ended up seeing with AEW is that it wasn't about the promotion anymore, which WWE became more about the promotion. AEW was more about the wrestlers, and that's what fans wanted to see. That's who fans want to go see. They don't want to see they don't want to see a sports entertainment show. They want to see a wrestling show with wrestlers that they could jump on board, wrestlers that they could cheer for, wrestlers that they could boo for, because this is where we learned about a man called MJF. This is where we learn about another person named Orange Cassidy. This is where
Oh,
we
oh,
get
it's funny. I saw Orange Cassidy down the block from me when he was wrestling for Bree Combination Wrestling. He
look
did
at
a match
that.
there. I got to see him in person. So yeah, it was bringing a lot of guys that you probably would never get to see on the WWE roster.
And they got a chance to shine. They got a chance to showcase their talent in which WWE would have never let them do it with with
Sonny,
50-50 booking. It was
you
ridiculous.
would never see Sony Kiss on WWE.
Yeah.
You would never see you got Wardlow, you got a lot of these guys, and the thing about it too is like a lot of people are getting afraid that a lot of talent from WWE comes over to AEW, but AEW has been doing a good mix of mixing in with also homegrown talent. And I get it that they're going to be guys that are going to be upset on the roster because they want their
Oh
spot.
yeah.
And it's like
Of course.
it's like it's going to happen, but you're seeing guys that you probably would not see get any type of burn in
hmm
WWE, but also too, you're getting dream matches like Dean Ambrose versus CM Punk. You're getting CM Punk versus Jericho. You're getting Dean Ambrose versus Jericho. You're getting like we never got these matches, and now these guys are getting to showcase versions of themselves that you wouldn't see, that you didn't get to see in a WWE ring. Like
hmm
Jericho, he shows how he always reinvents himself, and
hmm
this version of Jericho was just freaking phenomenal. And then even like Jack Swagger
hmm
coming in, like I like this version versus what they had in WWE. They didn't really use him, and just
and to granted, they didn't know how to use him. I think that was a lot of that because a lot of these writers that WWE had, they weren't even wrestling writers. They were writers from soap operas and things like that, where they understood how to tell stories. But in that kind of environment, a wrestling environment is very different. It's very different. Yeah, it's soap opera. Yeah, of course it is. It always will be. but it's based off of wrestlers who wrestle, not actors.
It's also it's spots and it's in-ring storytelling. Like if you really look at it, when Austin and Bret Hart, probably one of the greatest storytelling matches of all time, and when they did the reversal and then you had the shot of Austin bleeding from the head into sharpshooter, not giving up. Again, if it wasn't for earning it, the last let's see AEW, to be honest, until the newest wrestlers earns it, is awesome to have wrestlers that have been in WWE to actually, yeah, and they and don't forget a lot of those guys that are coming from WWE are indie guys
Mm-hmm.
who WWE's not giving the spot, so they're going over and they have a big fan following like Ruby Soho. Ruby Soho
Mm-hmm.
is awesome, but again, it's also again with wrestling, it's the art of storytelling in the ring, which is a writer cannot do.
Mm-hmm.
A writer
Yeah.
cannot, and it's like, yeah, you're writing this dialogue, it sounds phony, it's cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not working with the wrestlers to help tell the story with what they're getting in the hide space of their character, you're not really a wrestling writer. You're just trying to write a soap opera. Whereas these guys, again, they're telling the story in the ring. Like when I used to go see Green Combination Wrestling, these guys tell the story in the ring. Like guys like Darius Carter, guys like Marco Corleone, and all that. All these guys who I seen there, who did their thing. Even Austin Theory, I saw him in the Recombination Wrestling ring. Glad he's made it up to the big show and all that. But it was all about, even when you did the spots, they did the spots, and it was just you got the crowd and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a good example. The one Rick
Yeah,
has given, Danielson versus Garcia. The fact that you let Garcia beat Danielson the first match and he passed him out. That's the best part of it. Is a sign that you are building your roster. Garcia is very new to the business. He's talented, so I can't wait to see him grow. He has some work to go. He still has stuff to do on, but he's a pure wrestler, and that's what's great. What's his name? The current pure champion. I can't. Why is his name escaping me? Yuta Wheeler.
yeah,
Another amazing guy that probably wouldn't be successful in WWE in this current format. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the future, because I really want to talk about the future, and more importantly, before we even get to the future, let's go with the recent past, starting with McMahon out, Triple H in. We start seeing SummerSlam really is the kickoff of the Triple H era,
yeah,
and at first I wasn't. I really had no. Originally, I had no. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't find it. No excitement for SummerSlam, right? And it's SummerSlam, right? It's supposed to be the second biggest event next to WrestleMania. So I had going into SummerSlam, I didn't have that excitement for it. I knew it was coming. I knew it was happening, and I didn't have excitement for it. We hear about McMahon, and then I had even less excitement knowing that the main event was Lesnar and Reigns yet again. All right, this time in the last man standing, and I was like, we got to this. Here we go again with us getting Lesnar and Reigns, and then Triple H gives us the first match. Right, it's a new era now. Triple H is running the show, and we get Becky Lynch versus Bianca Belair, which is amazing. But what really caught my eye, was the returning Bailey, Io Shirai, who's now known as Io Sky, which I'm okay with. But even more shocking was seeing Dakota Kai, who was released. That was the first statement by Triple H saying, "Oh, I'm here." you know, and then we get a main event that again most people were wanted to tune out, and again the whole card was great. But we get this main event with Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, and I was amazed how creative they got with it. It felt like watching a McMahon match, not a McMahon match. I'm taking back a Austin match,
an attitude era.
right? Because he comes in this trailer, right? He comes in this trailer, and the first thing that he drives this trailer in, you see Reigns like, what the hell is this guy doing? And right from the get go, that's my favorite Reigns Lesnar match by far, because I
Yeah,
got sick and tired of it.
Yeah, a lot of people said that that was by far they finally. It took us a long time, but we finally got a great match out of the Lesnar and Roman Reigns
Yeah,
feud.
and
Which
everything about it was amazing. And again,
no,
Lesnar
the
was always
whole
those
list.
guys.
Yeah, Lesnar. I think we're getting Lesnar's best work because he's not burying people like before
Hmm.
when they had him in as the Beast and all that. I kind of like this version of Lesnar much better. And I feel it's more fan friendly. It's more
It's organic. That's what it
yes,
feels.
that's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like because you got like the Beast comes in and out like he's a phenomenal person to see in person because he is just a spectacle himself. Because for a person like him to be that physical, I remember when he went to MMA and they had to get custom gloves just for his hands. He is that much of a beast. He is a real life beast. But I think it's like this is just a fun version because I think you see him having fun now. Whereas
Hmm.
before, you can tell he wasn't having fun. You can tell it's like it this feels like this guy, yo, I could go grab a beer with this guy. And I love for a fact that he has a lot of his himself in his character now. This is my favorite version of Brock
Hmm.
Lesnar.
Yeah, the tractor when they brought out the tables. Yeah, we all seen the tables. We've seen the tables 100 times. But then to see them break the table and break the same table multiple times, that was something. Oh, they break a table that we never see that table again. But then he uses parts of the table, and then of course when he used the tractor to lift up the ring, it was like, oh, this is, you know
That's
what they're
gonna
saying.
be
This is the
a forever
last
moment.
match.
No, that's gonna like out of any like because we all know Brock Lesnar's highlights. I think that's gonna be the biggest highlight in his career, just to that
Yeah.
fun thing that fans are gonna be like, "Yo, I remember when he did that. That was nuts. It was crazy. He came in with the track." Because like one of the things people talk about also is when he came in with the beer truck.
Yeah,
This
the
is a
beer.
Lesnar moments solidified in
Well,
history.
Lesnar does have moments like that because he
Yeah,
also was the one that broke the ring with Big Show.
yeah, and
You
that's
remember
another one.
that? That's a big one. But that was done before. That was done before with these two, with
Kurt
Taz
Angle,
and
Kurt,
Bam Bam Bingo.
yeah, but
That's what.
Lesnar was a little bit more because it was a superplex from the top rope.
Oh yeah, and yeah, Paul Heyman going through the commentary, and that's what I love. I love storytelling that has a progression because Paul Heyman was always escaping Brock Lesnar. He always was able to escape him. This was the moment where, bam, you're gone. I'm putting, and I love what they did in SmackDown when he said the wise man is in the hospital. They were allowed to say what hospital now. He wasn't in a medical facility. Um, so SummerSlam was amazing. Then we get into Raw. Raw was great, and we're just getting matches. We're getting wrestling again in WWE. So I saw Raw. I saw SummerSlam. It made me excited to watch Raw. And then it made me excited to watch SmackDown. And we see returning characters. We're seeing people be coming back, going back to the characters that made them what they were. Kevin Owens is now back to being a prize fighter. We're seeing wrestlers wrestle again. Ricochet. Um, we're seeing Clarion Cross, which was a lot. He brought in his wife now. So yeah, AJ and Champa. That's another one. So my question for you is, who do you think is also coming back?
It's probably a number of guys that have been sitting on the sideline because like it's funny. All these guys who went through NXT, they all credit Triple H. Everybody has great stories about Triple H. So he's probably been in the ear with a lot of guys. And what he's probably gonna do too is this. Any of the guys that are not happy on the AEW roster, he's probably gonna reach out to them. And
Well,
we're
they're
probably
already
going
talking about poaching people,
yeah,
which
and he because like at the end of the day, AEW was poaching people to come over. They're gonna do the same thing. So anybody that's unhappy, and that was one of the things that it's reminiscent of Vince McMahon. When people started becoming unhappy in WCW, I mean, when Big Show came over, Benoit, Saturn, Dean Malenko, Guerrero, he was bringing those guys, Jericho. It's most likely probably going to be the same thing where Triple H is going to look for guys who are going to do great on the roster, and he's going to be bringing a lot of these people in. And yeah, again, Fandango, Breeze, I hope they do come back because Breeze and Fandango are amazing. They were just underutilized Gargano is another guy.
Hit Row's back
Yeah,
now. You know,
and so a lot of the guy.
Gargano's the big one. Gargano, I think, is the one that we have to keep an eye on because and I think Gargano's going to end up in WWE. I
Yeah,
honestly think.
he's gonna. It's a lot of guys are gonna want to work with Triple H.
Yeah.
It's gonna be based off your relationship,
Mhm.
and probably dollar amount, and obviously with Tony Khan with and Nick Khan, because I feel Tony Khan's gonna be the one who's going to be high on the WWE dollar amount of what's given.
Mhm.
Whereas Nick is just probably going to sign like a bunch of guys to AEW because he's has an unlimited, well, not necessarily unlimited purse, but he has that purse. But it's that's the thing that AEW has to watch out. They don't want to stack their deck. Whereas like you have all these guys, and then you become WWE of old, which had a stacked roster and didn't use them. And I think
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think it's great for the wrestlers involved because now again you have places you can go.
Yeah, and places that you want to go,
Yeah,
right? So what ended up happening when AEW was shown, it gave people wrestlers the opportunity to
hope.
leave WWE, right?
Give them hope.
Because it gave them hope because okay, I can't do it here, and there's no sign of this happening. Because again, no one saw McMahon leaving. No one did. They thought he was going to die in the chair. But when you see McMahon leaving, and then you see someone like Triple H coming in and saying, "I'm going to make this what it was. I'm going to make this great again." You know, pardon the excuse from a former Hall of Famer, right? Let's make WWE great again. It really is. And yeah, I agree with you, Rick. Triple H knows the Champa and Gargano is money. But
Also,
what I want to see with that is I wanted to see marinate. I don't want it. I think what Triple H is going to do that's really good is that he's going to give stories the time to breathe without taking too long. I think that's what happened with what we never got, which is the Sting and Undertaker story.
and don't forget too, Cody is still on the shelf when he turns. They
Mm-hmm.
and Cody, you could see from his time outside of WWE and now him in WWE and what he can bring to the roster.
Mm-hmm.
And did this new era under Triple H, and with those two actually working together, because Cody is also a student of the game too.
Yeah,
And with those two now
they're
working
cut from the
together,
same cloth, really.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I think they both have a mutual respect for each other. So those two working together, forget about it. It's going to be we're going to see a resurgence in WWE that is going to rival a lot of companies. As much as I love AEW, as much as I love the Bucks, Cody, and all that, Cody Rowe, I mean, you
Kenny
know what I mean,
Omega.
Kenny Omega, and they're doing a great thing. AEW is not going anywhere, but WWE is going to have such a big resurgence with guys who are cut from the cloth like Triple H and Cody being one of those guys. I see him moving up, like when he's ready to retire, as one of Triple H's right hand man, being a producer, someone like that,
Mhm.
helping producing shows because
Yeah, because he already has
he has that
the
back.
shot.
He has that. Yeah, he has that.
He
He
already
did
has
it
the
for
chops.
AEW.
What I also see happening is I could see some of these AEW guys when they're seeing that their time is like, okay, we're not being utilized here. Let's do it. Let's go. MJF is the biggest question of them all.
Yeah,
I think MJF will eventually show up in WWE. I
he
know what's
he is.
happening right now is a work. It's a good work, but it's a work. It was a shoot turned into a work. And what I mean about that for people that don't know what I'm talking about, a shoot is it's real. A work is they're playing the crowd. I think what ended up happening with MJF was exactly that and many people agree. It was a shoot
Rick,
that was
I do,
real.
Rick. I do, Rick. I do, Rick. I love both companies, Rick. I love all wrestling, man.
Yeah,
I'm a big wrestling head.
like a comic book guy, I am a Marvel and a DC guy. Like wrestling, I am an AEW WWE guy. Yes, WWE has been stale for a very long time. That doesn't mean I don't love it, WWE. I grew up on WWE. So,
Um, yeah,
but yeah, I think MJF is that he's the one that I think is going to be the big one. Well, we got the Punk MJF for the title. I think we're not going to see that for a while because
I
I think Punk versus Moxley which they just announced the unification match on Wednesday for next week. Here's what I think. I don't think that title's gonna that change is gonna happen. I think they're gonna make it where there's a DQ finish because they're so hot on each other.
You
So
want to know what would be interesting? Is that Moxley walks away with the title and Punk loses it only because MJF has some involvement. And that sets up an MJF and Punk feud.
But there was we already had an MJF
Well,
Punk feud.
you continue it, but MJF, I think he's one of the hottest young heels on the market right now.
Yeah. So it looks like MJF Punk was the plan until the injury. Yeah. The summer of Punk didn't happen in AEW, so and I think what's going to end up happening with Punk is Punk's eventually going to turn heel. I think all signs are pointing to Punk turning heel because all the other wrestlers are making it seem like you didn't want it, this business. The common thread with Punk is it's about the money for you. And he even addressed it this week that it's about the money.
But also, too, that's where CM Punk has done some of his best work as a heel.
Oh, he's a fantastic heel.
Yeah, Phil Brooks is a fantastic heel, CM Punk. Like when he comes in as a face, delivers matches, but he is a phenomenal heel, and that's where he shines. Like you have people who can play bad guys, and CM Punk is one of those guys. And when they pull
the Straight Edge Society was amazing.
Oh yeah, I mean, in every company he's been in as a heel and everything, like even though like in TNA, TNA didn't know how to use him. And it was a waste to use him as one of Raven's lackeys. But when he was in Ring of Honor, he has some 5-star matches. Then he comes to WWE, they make him the face. Then he leaves, comes back as a heel. And Straight Edge Society, like you said, Straight Edge Society, the pipe bomb. Even at the pipe bomb when he dropped it, he still was he was that guy was in the gray. Because he wasn't a face, he wasn't a heel. He was just that guy that was saying stuff that people wanted to hear.
He was a tweener.
Yeah. But when he went full heel again, it's CM Punk's heel work is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and he's so good at it. I want to see what MJF does as a face because I think he will be a face eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I think with a wrestler you can play both parts. If you're a really great wrestler, you can play both a face and a heel.
Yeah, well, the two best examples will have to be The Rock and The Rock, Stone Cold. Well, 3 examples because even Hogan. When Hogan became a heel, he was a great heel.
Oh yeah, you got Hogan, The Rock, Austin. I don't count Undertaker as a face or heel because Undertaker was just that guy.
He was a tweener. He was also a tweener.
He was in the middle. Triple H, he's done it. Shawn Michaels has done it. Kevin Nash has done it because Kevin Nash has been both face and heel. The late Scott Hall has done it. So it's like that tells about your work.
Well, Ric Flair.
Yeah, Ric Flair.
Perfect.
Perfect heel. Perfect face. Big Show. Yeah, Big Show's definitely done it. Big Show.
And Rick, he's the epitome of that.
And Big Show used to do kip ups too.
Big Show is the epitome of turns. They made fun of it at one time where he was like, "What is he going to be this time?" The wheel of Big Show. So he's known for that. So you can't count Big Show. He doesn't even know what he is.
Even Rey Mysterio in WCW, he's done heel work when he lost the mask.
When he lost the mask and the Filthy Animals, it still didn't feel right.
It didn't feel right because it's like he came off as a Punk, and it was like if you look at that era of WCW, it was a bad written era.
It was the downfall. It was the part that no one cared about. Anyway, it's been a blast, man. I'm looking forward to what's to come. Sean, we had a blast talking today. Woo! Good stuff, man. We talked about wrestling. We talked about She-Hulk. We talked about your book coming up, man. Sebastian, tell us one more time where we can find you.
You can find me on the Nerds of the Round podcast every Tuesday live on the Nerds of the Round podcast. Izzy will be a guest with us this coming Tuesday. We're going to be talking.
He already made me a guest without even telling me after.
You can find me on patreon.com/Bonet Studios. I have released my webcomic Concrete Combat on there. Subscriptions are only $3. Part 1, 2, and 3 are out. Part 4 comes out in September for chapter 1. You can also find me on the Instagram with my handle right there, Sebastian Bonet Art. And everywhere else that's social media. That is me, Sebastian Bonet. Boom.
Thanks a lot, Sebastian. Hey guys, if this is your first time watching the show, thank you for watching. Make sure you hit that like And don't forget to subscribe, man. It really helps me out. Leave a comment there. Watch the other videos. I got a ton of videos. So happy we hit the 1,000 mark. So we got 1,000 subscribers. Now we got to work on building up our watch time, guys. So I need you guys to watch my show in some way or fashion, even if you leave it in the background noise. There's a lot of good stuff there. We got audio podcasts going on as well. You can listen to a lot of stuff. There's a lot of content in the show. And yes, I have coming up this weekend, I'm having my Terrificon video finally going to be released. I didn't have time to do it, so I'm going to be releasing the Terrificon video. I'm also going to release a Fan Expo Boston show, which was fantastic. I got to talk to a lot of creators out there, so be on the lookout for that one. That should be coming out either this week or next week sometime. But we got to do so make sure you like, subscribe. Yep, you know it. I love my wrestling. I always love my wrestling. I love my comic books, guys. I love reading comics. Don't forget to pick up your comic books. Go get them and go check out the pull list. That's enough for me. I think I've done enough of a shameless plug. We'll see you guys next time on the Izzyverse. Until next time, Excelsior.